Phil Hodges is recording it, and it will be on YouTube. Maybe Carol will send us the connection if you want your neighbors to see the meeting on YouTube. But first, would you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. We have two parts to our program tonight. In the first part, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Aragon, who is our representative from Adopt a Pond. There have been some members who have been working very hard to figure out ways that we can improve our lake. Some of them are very costly. Adopt a Pond, since we've been chosen or accepted, is a free program, and it's one that may help us. And she will tell us exactly how that will happen.
Yeah, hi, my name is Jennifer, and I work for Hillsborough County. And Hillsborough County isn't able to maintain stormwater ponds. A lot of these ponds are privately owned throughout the county, even publicly, Hillsborough County owned ponds. The county can only maintain them to a certain point, and usually that's the county owned ponds, it's just mowing around them. So what's nice is that our program is something that goes above and beyond what the county can normally do in stormwater ponds. And again, it's offered for free to you guys so that we can provide some services to help you guys out. I'm the coordinator for the program, and basically you guys are going to be working very closely with me. I'm the specialist for you guys to refer to with any questions that you have as far as pond management goes. We've been doing the Adopt a Pond program since the early 90s, so we've seen some good things and bad things go on. A lot of times the bad things have been when groups have decided on changing the plan of action, doing some management, having consulted with us. They went ahead and did it, and things ended up going wrong. It was costly for them. So we want to try to avoid some of those issues. So any questions again that you guys have on managing the pond, feel free to let me know. You guys are going to have a group representative, and that's going to be the person to kind of field the questions through, rather than me getting questions from 20 different people and not sure exactly who it is. And if the whole group is on board, it's good to field them through the main representative, so I know that the group is all kind of aware of what's going on. Makes it a little bit easier to handle the questions. But let me talk just a little bit. This is going to be kind of a somewhat informal discussion here. Any questions that you guys have throughout this discussion, feel free to let me know. I have some slides just so you guys can get some visuals of what I'm talking about, rather than me talking and coming up with all sorts of different ideas of what things can look like. I figured I'd put them in a presentation so you guys can have a little bit better idea of what exactly I'm talking about. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about the drainage for the area, because it's very important to know the drainage for this lake, because a lot of that can influence what's going on in the lake. Specifically, different types of pollutants that can wash into the lake and cause problems. In particular, you guys are seeing the algae blooms going on. There's various things that can be contributing to that. So for your lake, you have some water flowing in near Cherry Hill Drive, and then you have water flowing out through the other areas, kind of in the northwest part and kind of the southwest part of the lake there. Those are kind of the main entrance, the main exit. But you also have several other inlets where the water flows. Did I have something? Right. I might have accidentally pushed the button with my hand. You have several pipes that drain into the pond as well throughout the neighborhood, so it's important to be aware of those. This is not, I know I didn't touch it that time. several others. And again, the reason to be aware of this is because any kind of pollution that's on the ground, when it rains, is going to wash into the pond. Some of it could be washing into the pond directly from the yards around the pond, and some of it can be draining from several yards away. Because you live in this drainage area. Hopefully this isn't going to keep going on and off. I don't know if the battery's going or what. So this is the drainage again for the lake. Wanted to give you some ideas. I did some mock-ups of the...
This has happened in the past.
That's not good. All right. So I did some mock-ups of give you some visuals of what the lake could look like with some plants around it. One of the requirements of the Adopt a Pond program is that you do have to put some plants in the pond. The reason why we do this is because plants are a great natural filter for the water. We have pollutants coming in from fertilizers, from pet waste, from any sand that washes in there, anything from the streets, metals, things like that, from the breaks. All that stuff is going to end up washing into the pond when it rains. These ponds are designed not only for flood control, for that water to flow in here, but the ponds are designed also to filter that water because, again, the water leaves that pond, goes downstream to other ponds, wetlands. Eventually, all this water gets to Tampa Bay. So all these stormwater ponds are designed to be vegetated so that the water can be filtered, so that when finally it leaves the pond, it's going to be much cleaner. So these plants are great for, again, filtering, but they also help slow down the flow of that water. And they help slow down any wave action that's going on in the pond. When it's windy out, you guys have a no wake for your boats, so you don't have to worry about that kind of wave action. But any kind of movement of the water can cut into the shoreline. And I know you guys have the sea bank, the seawall all the way around it. But these plants will help in making a buffer, basically, of that wind action. So it'll slow down through those plants, so you don't have any cutting away underneath of the seawalls that are out there. It also, if you guys have any areas of bare soil around, and when it rains, that rainwater is going to carry all that dirt along with the rainwater into the pond. And these will slow down the movement of that water off of your yards also, so that if there is any dirt, it's going to settle out. Because even though dirt is a natural material, it can be considered a source of pollution as well. A lot of dirt getting into a water body can make it very murky and cause problems with the fish in there. And it can also smother any plants that are around there. So the plants will help and slow down that flow of water. So this one, just wanted to show you a close-up of some of the plants. You can see in the back here, this red one is this grass. It's planted on the shoreline. It's great for slowing down the water and preventing erosion from happening. So if you have any areas where grass just doesn't want to grow, no matter what you do to it, this is a great plant for putting in its place. The next plant is beach sunflower. This one's called muley grass. This one's beach sunflower, and it's a great drought tolerant as well as the muley grass. And again, it's a great ground cover. I saw it in some of the yards around the pond. This is also great in areas because you find it on sand dunes. So it's able to grow in sandy soils, dry soils. It's great to act as a ground cover in areas where you can't grow grass, or even just along the bank area. Just helps slow down that flow of water. With the grass that you guys have, it's very low growing, so the rainwater washes off those areas very quickly, and so the pollutants will be carried with it much quicker. What we try to strive for is to slow down that flow of water to prevent those pollutants from getting into the pond. Another plant here, which I have just, in the back right here, is called pickerel weed. It's a purple flowering plant that sandhill cranes will nest around these plants. Birds and butterflies like the flowers of it, so it's a great plant to put in the water, and again, all these plants act as a great filter. Over here, this white flowering plant is called duck potato, and ducks will eat the root system of these plants. They'll find food from the plant itself. And again, it's a native plant. All of these are native plants. That's all we provide, things that are from Florida and do well in Florida and don't require a lot of maintenance. This one's great for in the water. The last one I have here is called Golden Canna. It's got a great golden flower to it, yellow flower. And again, native, and it's great to have along the shoreline. This one's not going to be something that will be able to grow in all the parts of the shoreline. I saw there were some deeper spots. Probably it'll be best in about a foot of water or shallower. This plant will do well in that area. I did another little mock-up. This is the inlet to the pond, and I have the muley grass up here to help slow down the flow of water. I'm assuming you guys put the cement there because you're probably getting a lot of water flowing in real quickly and cutting away at the ground there. Well, having it that area where it's considered impervious, so it's not porous, like all of the pavement around here is not porous, so the water washes off that area very quickly. By putting up some vegetation just in front of it, you'll slow down the flow of water and prevent any cutting away in front of that cemented area. I also added in here just, again, these are just to give you visuals. It's not necessarily that we're going to be doing this, just get an idea of what some of these plants could look like around the pond. I did Fakahatchee grass right here, or gamma grass is another name for it, easier to remember. This is a grass that grows near water bodies, and it has the flowers up here. Just another look, I have the beach sunflower right here. This one is soft rush. It's great for erosion as well, does well in the water, likes being kind of right at the water's edge, to about a foot in the water. We have the pickerel weed, that purple flower plant I showed in the previous slide, and then also the duck potato here. And you guys already have some cannas. They're not the golden canna that we provide, but it's this similar thing, just a different flower color. So you guys already can kind of get an idea of what those cannas can look like. This is another example. This is that area where it flows out of the pond and goes to Cypress Creek on the kind of northwest area of the pond. This one, I have the pickerel weed, the golden canna, the duck potato, and then this one back here, just to give you a closer up view of it. This is blue flag iris, again another native. This one is very pretty, especially springtime is when you see the blooms. Most of these other plants will bloom, springtime, summer, fall, and the winter is the only time that they might die back to the ground, or they will die back to the ground, a lot of them. The irises, they don't die back, but they only flower, in the springtime. So that's just to kind of get a different look. It has a different leaf shape to it, so it adds a little bit of different visual appeal. These again are just kind of an overview of a lot of the plants that we just talked about. Just again, some closer looks at some of them. Cordgrass is one that I hadn't mentioned, but it's similar to the muley grass. The cordgrass doesn't have the purple bloom that the muley grass does. But this one is great for erosion. It grows a little bit taller than the muley grass does. The muley grass grows to be about 3.5 feet tall, where the cordgrass will grow to maybe 4 or 5, probably more like 5 feet tall, depending on what you do. This cordgrass can be cut down to about a foot above the ground each year, and that'll keep it from growing quite so high every year. So then it'd probably be about closer to 4 feet tall if you're doing that on a regular basis. But again, great for erosion control. And here again is the Fakahatchee grass or gamma grass, the Gulf muley, and then the beach sunflower. And again, these are great drought-tolerant plants, great for erosion control, preventing that soil from washing away when it rains. We can also provide some different trees. You guys are familiar with the cypress trees. You have them in those islands throughout the pond. We can also provide Florida elm trees, the red maple. Those would be planted on the yard side. They wouldn't be planted in the water. The cypress trees, we could plant those in the water or even on the yard side of the seawall. It'll do fine in either of those places. One of the things that slide went through that one. One of the things that I like going over with groups is coming up with a management plan. And again, if you guys have any questions about any of the plans that we talked about or anything, throughout this process, just feel free to chime in, let me know. This isn't just me talking here. This is your guys' pond. I want to hear your input. It is good coming up with a management plan though, because this is kind of the plan going in place of how you are going to take care of this pond for the long term. If you don't have a plan in place, something's going to come up and you'll be like, I have no idea what to do. Or the group representative changes. Maybe they had all the information, they knew what was going on, they leave, then everyone else is left in the dark. Having a plan in place, if something changes, then you guys will know exactly what you're going to be doing moving forward. The plan might change over time depending on what's going on in the pond. These water bodies, they change over time. They're never going to be the same, throughout their existence. They definitely change. So the plan can evolve based on the pond. And again, if you guys have any questions about the pond, or if you see something growing in there or something changing, I'm always there to ask what's going on. I've had it before where someone sees a plant and they're like, oh yeah, it's there. Then they come out like a week or two later and they see it's multiplied a bit. And then they come out 2 months later and suddenly it's spreading very rapidly over the pond. And then they call me. Well, at that point, it's much bigger to deal with at that point, more costly. When you start seeing a change and you're wondering what's going on, you need to call me right away. And you can either send me a picture of the plant, or I can come out here and look at it, and I can let you know whether it's a good plant or it's not, whether it needs to be handled at that time or not. And as far as managing the lake, if you wanted to hire a management company to manage it, or if you wanted to manage it yourselves, that's up to you guys. Our program is basically to guide you along the process, and we can help in providing some resources along the way. But we don't come out here and take care of the pond for you. Right now you guys don't have any vegetation growing around the shoreline, or very little amount of vegetation. So at this point, when I was out there wasn't very much vegetation, not very much invasive nuisance problem plants that were out there. So it really doesn't require a lot of control at this point. But again, things change. There could be something in there that ends up popping up later down the road that you'll need to control. And we have a bunch of resources, information to be able to help you out along in that process, and a lot of free things that you guys can do. Through our process, we also offer different opportunities as well, different kind of somewhat grant opportunities where you apply to receive something, and we let you guys know along the way. We've had opportunities where we had like trash catchers where you could install in front of, if you had like a pipe coming into the pond that there was a lot of trash coming into, you can install a trash catcher, and we offered opportunities for getting one of those before. So there's different opportunities like that along the way. But as far as the management plan goes, you guys probably, a lot of you picked up the inspection checklist when you came in. That's what we look for when we come out to see, kind of get an idea of the health of the pond. We don't come out and just look at one thing. There's all sorts of things that can contribute to the health of the pond. So I listed on this slide all the various things that we look at. So I came out here pretty recently and did an evaluation of the pond. And you guys can keep that sheet and refer back to it to kind of know all on this process, what areas could be improved upon with the pond. And I kind of wanted to have a discussion because I can talk about some areas that I saw when I was out there that could use some improvement, that could help improve the health of the pond. So anyone have any questions at all?
The first picture you showed, the overview with Jerry Hills in it.
Excuse me, I have a microphone. If you can state your name and...
Nancy DeWild on Vincent's Drive. On the first picture, that overview, looking at the Cherry Hills, it looks like that's all green algae, or is that supposed to be grass? On the lower,
You're talking about
the lower right hand
this
side.
right here?
No, oh no, not Not on our lake. The stuff that's the golf course.
This?
That's grass?
Yeah, that's the,
All right. It
the
looks like
green.
algae, I didn't know.
No, the water body is the dark part, and then, the green here is just, the golf course part. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely, again, ask me throughout the process. If I'm saying something, that you don't understand, I'm sure that there's other people that have the same questions, so, definitely ask me.
Candy Stanley. If you say plant vegetation, if you have a seawall, you plant it right on the seawall, not in the water?
You would plant it in the water. Yeah, there's plants that we can provide both for in the water and out of the water, depending on kind of what you want to see. Because this is your backyard, we just want to enhance the look of it and enhance, the quality of the water. The main thing for this program is we definitely want to get plants in the water because those are going to be great at filtering the water. So like in these plants here, these are all for in the water, all 5 of these. We also have additional plants too that can be put in the water. These are kind of the main ones that tend to do well in this area, and most of them would do well with the depth of the water too that you guys have out there. Certain plants are better for shallow areas, and so those aren't included on here. But these, would be actually in the water. And they'll do fine being, with the bottom like a foot underwater, planted, a foot under the water, and then, probably about 3, maybe like a third of the plant will be above water. If the water level goes up, these plants can tolerate adjustments in the water. So if the water level goes down and they're completely out of the water, they're okay with that for parts of the year. And if the water level comes up, as long as part of the plant is above the surface, they're fine. They'll do okay. Even if they go just slightly under, as long as the light's able to get to them, they'll tend to survive. But the majority of the time, the base of it's just going to be about like a foot underwater.
I have muley grass in my yard, and I'm just looking for 3 places that I have 3 extra pieces. Where would you put muley grass?
The muley grass would be for areas that are out of the water. It could survive with the water coming up maybe to the very base of it for a short period of time, but because it's a drought-tolerant plant, it doesn't like a lot of water. It'd be best in areas that that are not submerged in water. So we would not plant that in the pond.
Are you just along the seawall or something?
Yeah, because you guys have the seawall, there's such a big step. Planting this on top of the seawall would be perfectly fine. As well as the beach sunflower would do okay. Fakahatchee grass would be great for that area. And some of these, like the Fakahatchee grass, will grow a little bit taller than the muley grass. But for some of these taller plants, what you could do too, rather than having straight out in your field of vision, you can have them more kind of at an angle so they'd be more in between houses so that you're still able to look out and get the view and you're not having a plant blocking your view. So there's ways of strategically placing these to be able to get them in there and not block your vision. And again, we provide a variety for that reason because everyone likes kind of different looks. It's kind of flexible on what plants we provide. I think someone in the back had a question, right? Yeah, you had a question?
No.
I was wondering, at the weir on Cherry Hill,
Yeah.
if we were to
The
plant
microphone.
plants in
Bruce.
that,
Oh, the
Hit the
microphone.
microphone. The video will pick it up unless you have the microphone.
I wondered about the weir on Cherry Hill. If we were to plant these water plants in that area as a barrier, because a lot of times the stuff coming in from the golf course is garbage. And at the time when it was still being operated, there were a lot of pollutants probably and fertilizers coming in. And I thought that might be something we could do. And the second question I had is, what about the fish that we have, the carp that eat the grass?
Yeah, and spoken with Jack earlier about the carp. The first question he had was about planting plants, kind of in front of the weir to help block some of the pollutants from coming in. The only problem with putting plants in front of like pipes and in front of areas where water flows in is that we don't want to block the flow of that water, because this is acting as a drainage area, so we do want the water to get in there. We don't want to cause any flooding, further up the line. So we don't want to plant the plants directly in front of it. Plus, it's deeper in that area. That's kind of the area for the water to come in. It's a little bit deeper, and these plants won't grow that deep in the water. Plants that would grow deeper would be lily pads, but we don't provide those just because they tend to be a little bit more high maintenance of a plant. They're great as far as providing habitat, and there's native water lilies that are great. But again, they're a little bit higher maintenance, so we try to provide things that are going to be low maintenance, that you don't need to worry about trimming down or you definitely don't want to use fertilizer or anything on any of these plants. Because they're used to this area, they don't need any extra treatment to get them going. They'll need somewhat like the land plants, they'll need a little bit of water to get established, but because they're drought tolerant, once they get established, then they don't need those in there. And then as far as the grass carp goes, I was looking, we have records of when ponds and lakes applied for grass carp. And I was looking, and I saw it was like in 1988 or something. One of the people that lived around the pond had applied for the grass carp permit. And it says that it was applied for like 800 grass carp and 600 were bought. Do you guys know if you had bought some more recently than like the early 90s or?
No, 400 were put in.
Okay.
The hydrilla was not going out fast enough. They put in another 200, and of course they were put in like this. They grew to like this, and now there is no grass.
Okay, and no grass carp either that anyone has seen?
I saw 3 in the channel last year.
Okay.
They were together. That's all I've seen.
That's always a concern when there's grass carp in there. Grass carp are great for controlling certain types of vegetation, but they are can be very big problems in other situations. Because they live about 15 years, once you put them in there, you're kind of stuck with them for a while. They're pretty hard to catch. Sometimes they'll be eaten when they're first put in there as smaller fish. If a hawk is going by, they might be eaten. But again, once they're in there and they get bigger, they're hard to control. With putting plants in the pond, that's something that we will definitely want to keep an eye on. If you see that we put plants in there and they're suddenly all getting eaten, we'll definitely want to put up some kind of barrier so that the grass carp can't get to them. That'll help them get established and survive, and then maybe we can remove the barrier after that, and the grass carp will be less likely to completely eliminate them. In the beginning, the plants, we won't have them real in dense clumps. We'll kind of space them apart a little bit and let them fill in the clump that we plant them in. And at that point, they're more vulnerable to being eaten just because there's not as many in there. Once they get established, they'll be a little bit better. We definitely don't want to be putting more grass carp in the pond because you guys don't have the vegetation that they prefer, which is the hydrilla. Having a little bit of hydrilla in the pond isn't a big issue. You want there to be some, especially if you have the grass carp, because the grass carp needs something to eat. If they don't have anything to eat, then they go looking for things to eat, which is usually when they start going after your good plants. And if you completely eat everything in the pond, then that's when you start seeing the water quality getting degraded. You start seeing the pond getting murky. So we definitely, the grass carp again are good for control, but you definitely need to be careful in how they're used. So again, I wouldn't advise putting any more grass carp in there. If there's any left, just let them live out their life, and we'll keep an eye on the plants that are put in there, make sure that they're not eaten. So you had a question?
Yes. Do you have a pamphlet on how tall these plants get, the ease of maintenance, and are they good for these small fish to hide in so the birds and other fish can't eat them when they're young, so they have a chance to grow up?
Yep. I have an Adopt a Pond notebook that we have electronically. I brought a copy here, and you can see why we don't make a lot of copies of this, because it's pretty thick. But this goes step by step based on our checklist. So if you have a low value in one area of the checklist, you can refer to the notebook and get some ideas of how you can improve that value. In the notebook, we have a section called planted or vegetation coverage. And in there, I'll show you guys here. I have a copy. I have a copy here, and it basically gives you ideas of what to expect with a plant. I can tell you right now that all the plants will be great for providing shelter for young fish. You know, rather than doing any kind of you know, man-made structure, it's always great having natural things in there, because again, the birds are going to be attracted to the plants for finding some food from them, and the fish will be able to hide in there. I went out with a group who was doing an assessment on one of the lakes that's in the Sefner area, and we did a fish assessment. I kind of watched them doing the fish assessment just so I could get a better idea of how they did it. And they kind of checked out the different types of fish that were in that lake and where they were found. It was always near the vegetation that we found the majority of the fish out there, because they're able to hide in those areas a lot easier and get away from any kind of predators that are out there. So definitely vegetation is great for fish habitat. The vegetation, all again, is very low maintenance. Actually, there's no maintenance with it, except for if by chance there's any weeds coming up, they might need to be weeded a little bit. But with any kind of plants, any yard stuff, even without the stuff that we put in there, there's some plants that are coming up that are nuisance plants that could be pulled out right now. So with any kind of stuff, this pond is not going to be a no maintenance pond. There's always going to be something that needs to be done. But again, we provide these plants to make it as low maintenance as possible. The plants, you don't need to trim them down, you don't need to hedge them, fertilize them, water them, anything like that, except for the land plants just once they get established. And some of those, if it's raining like right now, you don't need to even water them, because they're getting enough water from just the natural rainfall that we get. So again, we provide low maintenance. That's why we don't do the lily pads, is because they're good for ponds, but they're more of a high maintenance plant. So we just want to provide things that aren't going to be a lot of work.
Jennifer, could you go on with your evaluation of our pond?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That you kind of stopped there, and I know there are people who need to leave early, so we don't want to miss that part.
Also, can we look up any of this on your website?
Yes.
Any questions?
Yes, the Adopt a Pond notebook is going to be on our website. You can access it at any time, and that includes our checklist and again all the information associated with this evaluation. So you can access it at any time. Plus, I'll send you guys an electronic copy as well, so you can refer to that anytime if you want to pass it around. If you don't like using the internet or don't have the internet, that's another way of accessing it. For my evaluation when I came out here, this again, just I think like a week ago or so, I was out here. And the things that I saw as far as visible pollution control, I'm looking for things that are visible. There's pollution that you can see and pollution that you can't see by looking down at the ground. Pollution that you can see, some examples are trash, pet waste, lawn clippings. Out of those examples, I did see a little bit of trash in the pond. I saw one pile of dog waste near the water, near the edge of the pond. And I did see a small amount of grass clippings that were actually right on top of a storm drain. So I did see a little bit of things that can cause problems. Trash is something everyone thinks of as far as pollution. So you can understand the effects that can have on a water body, on the animals that live and are around the water body. For pet waste, the reason why we look at that as pollution, some people might think, hey, it's waste, it's fertilizer, we use manure. as a fertilizer in our yards, but pet waste not only doesn't have the nutrients that are found in manure, waste from cows, but manure is specially treated when you buy it at the store. And it's treated to eliminate bacteria that is found in everyone's waste, and all animals' waste. So when a dog goes without it on the ground and you leave it there, there's bacteria in that waste. And when it rains, it ends up washing into the pond. So it brings that bacteria along with it, plus it brings those nutrients. Those nutrients add to the amount of nutrients that are naturally found in the water and fuel the growth of plants. In particular, if you don't have any vegetation in the pond, it's going to end up causing algae to grow. Algae is naturally in the pond, but when it has nutrients coming in and fueling its growth, it ends up blooming, growing very rapidly. When you have algae growing in a pond, it can cause major fluctuations in the amount of oxygen that's in a pond. And with those fluctuations, could end up bringing the oxygen level down so low that the fish can't survive. And that's why a lot of times we end up seeing fish kills, especially this time of year, is because the algae grows with the heat of the summer and also with the rain coming in and washing everything off of everyone's yards. It ends up fueling the growth of that algae and then causing the fish kill to occur. So pet waste is definitely something that we consider a pollution source. Lawn clippings, that's nutrients. Any kind of decaying vegetation can add nutrients to the pond. And just normal plants, dying in the winter will release some nutrients, but when you add to that, it definitely fuels that growth of algae out there. So any lawn clippings, any leaves that are washed down the storm drain are basically just decaying in there and could cause flooding if you end up putting too much of that down the storm drain. Could clog the pipes, and then it also is adding the nutrients to the pond. So we definitely don't want that going in there. So any lawn clippings, if you have yard management companies, just have them blow the lawn clippings back into the yard or sweep them up and put them out, like with your yard waste or in a compost pile if you have one. So again, I saw that as excellent. On the scale you can see there's just one step higher than that. So because I saw a few things out there, ways to improve that score is just on a regular basis. I'm sure you guys probably are already checking for trash. If you see any out there, just pick it up, or make sure that you have someone. If you're not already doing it, go around and kind of just patrol the area on a regular basis. Once a month or right after a heavy storm or something, pick up any trash. Some of that might be blowing into from your yard. Your trash that you put out or your recycling bins. If it's a windy day, some of those trash cans can be knocked over and blow that stuff into the drain. So some of it might not be deliberately put in there. I'm sure most of it's not deliberately put in there, but again, just pick it up and get that out. Pet waste, we actually have a pledge where you can get a free dispenser for pet waste bags. And we'll send that out to you just by taking the pledge, which basically says that you're going to be picking up after your pet. So I can give you the information for that to be able to get one of those mailed to you. And then if you see anyone leaving the pet waste on the ground, just give them a friendly reminder to pick it up, because we don't want that bacteria being left on the ground and those nutrients. And then again, I talked about the lawn clippings. For the habitat for the wildlife, I gave it a good ranking. You guys have the islands that are out there that provide a bunch of trees and vegetation for birds and other animals to be able to hide and nest in. Adding things like habitat boxes, by adding the plants, you'll be adding more habitat for areas for animals to live. And also adding natural spaces where, say a bird is coming from the northern area of Sun City and wants to head further south. By adding areas where that bird can go and hide in case something is coming after it, or say a squirrel or some animals running on the ground, having areas where they can kind of hide, whether it be bushes, trees, things like that, allow it to be able to better survive. So again, that's different ideas for adding and improving that wildlife habitat. And again, as soon as we do the planting, that'll help and benefit the pond. the Florida yards and neighborhoods. I did see a couple yards that were around the pond that we consider a Florida yard. I gave you guys a handout. I think we ran out of them, but a lot of you guys probably have the handout. It talks about the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. It's not a particular plant that you need to buy. It's just putting the right plant in the right place and using mulches to help hold down the moisture in the soil so you don't have to water the plants so often. It's just following these, protecting the waterfront by having a vegetative buffer around there, leaving a 10-foot area that's not fertilized. There's a county ordinance that you're not supposed to fertilize within 10 feet of a water body to help protect that so that those nutrients don't wash into the water when it rains to help prevent these algae blooms from happening. So it's employing principles like that. You can see by the flyer on the back I have just a drawing of kind of an example of what a Florida yard would be like. So it doesn't necessarily need to be that the whole yard has plants all the way around it. You can have some grassy areas and areas that you need them. So definitely doing more of those will help in preventing pollutants from washing into the water. So using those is definitely a benefit for the pond. And there's also a thing called a rain garden. And if anyone ends up doing a rain garden, I can give you more information on that through email. Basically, making a rain garden is putting in an area in your yard where the water normally flows to anyways. You would put just a little bit, kind of a sunken in area for the rainwater to get slowed down. You would have plants in there that, again, filter the water, slow down the water, so that then eventually it trickles out and then gets into the pond. So it's filtered before it gets to the water, and then once it gets in the pond, it'll be filtered again there. If anyone ends up doing a rain garden in their yard, and again, I'd be happy to talk more about it with you. I'd be happy to provide the plants because, again, we provide aquatic plants and, like the irises that I showed you and the golden canna, they'd be great for a rain garden. Even the muley grass would be fine for a rain garden too. So I'd be happy to provide those for you. Rain gardens are a great addition. They can, just look like a regular planted flower bed, but they're doing a great job in filtering that water. So those, again, are just a few things about Florida yards. The University of Florida Extension Office is the one who runs the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods program. I'm going to be providing you guys, your representative, with this folder that has a book in it about Florida-friendly landscaping. So it tells you more details about Florida-friendly landscaping and how just doing it, a little bit can improve the area around you and improve the pond environment as well. So I definitely encourage that, and I'd be happy to talk more with you and get you in contact with the Extension Office. They can send someone down here to talk to you more about it and talk to you about how you can incorporate it in your yards. But again, you've got a couple yards around here that are good examples of what a Florida yard would be. As far as the Florida yards and neighborhoods, I only saw a couple yards that are employing a lot of those principles. So I ranked you kind of low on that one. I ranked you as a fair ranking. By adding more of that definitely will boost your score. The goal by the end of the 3 years that you're in the program is to improve your score. So there's definitely some improvement that can be made on the Florida yards and neighborhoods in the drainage area. The next one is the area of the pond that's covered in vegetation. We look at what's called the littoral zone, which is basically the shallow area of the pond. And at that shallow area, you guys have less than 15% of the shallow area covered in vegetation. So through our program, we will help in improving that score. So you'll be able to boost your score on that one. We'll provide the plants for you guys. Out of the amount of vegetation that you have, the amount of plants in the pond, we look at the amount that is problem plants, nuisance plants, invasive. Those are all interchangeable words that we use. So out of the nuisance plants that you have, or out of the vegetation that you have, there was more than half of it was nuisance, just because you have such few areas of vegetation in there. Basically, all that I saw was nuisance. And again, it's not much that you have in there, so that score is going to be high right now. Once you add more plants, and again, we'll provide the native ones, things that are not going to be invading the pond, taking over it, that score will get better. You'll have less and less percentage of problem plants. For duckweed is very small floating leaf plants. I didn't see any wallows out there, so at this point, you don't have to worry about that. If you see any very, very small floating leaf that maybe it would look like you could walk on top of it, just call me and I'll let you know whether it's duckweed and kind of how to manage it. But at this point, again, you don't need to worry about that. The algae coverage, the pond is very murky. That indicates that there's algae in there. The watercolor is brown, which could be natural for this area, but because it's so murky, that's kind of indicating that there's an algae problem out there. By adding plants, and again, you can add plants not only around the shoreline, but you can also build some floating islands. So if you aren't able to have enough shoreline area that you can cover, you can create these floating islands. And I've got information that I'll be giving you on that. I have some on my computer too, where I can show you an example of what it looks like. The floating island basically is just a little platform that you set a little bit further out into the pond, and it has a little weight with a rope to keep it in place. And then you can plant the same plants that you plant in the water along the edge. You can plant them in there too, and their roots just hang just into the water, and they do just fine. So I can give you that information so you can add a little bit to that, instead of strictly around the shoreline. For storm drains marked, I went around just to see all the drains that I showed you on the map earlier. And some of the storm drains are marked with a little blue rectangular marker that says, something about no trash and drains, something like that. We also have these markers. I didn't see all the drains marked. There was probably about maybe 25%, maybe a little bit less of the drains marked. So one of the first steps in this process before we do the planting is to finish marking the storm drains. These markers are just basically kind of a visual reminder that nothing should be going down the drain. So if you are mowing your lawn, or your company's mowing the lawn, they'll see these markers and realize, hey, I shouldn't be putting this down the drain. Nothing should be going down the drain except for the rainwater. So I'll give you the supplies for that. Including the adhesive to put on the cement pad that's right above the storm drain. That's part of the storm drain. So I have those and door hangers.
The Boy Scout troop in the area plans to put these on all of these storm drains in Sun City.
Okay.
Probably won't be until October, November, because it'll be cooler then.
Okay. Yeah, if there's already plans in place for doing that, then that's not a problem. As long as they get marked at some point, that's what we're looking for.
Every one of the drains has been marked at one time.
Mm-hmm. And then things have gotten knocked off. Yeah, that does happen where, they might get knocked into there. Definitely applying a big amount of adhesive sometimes helps that, but even with that, sometimes they get knocked off. So yeah, just reapplying them just to kind of, again, give a little bit of a reminder. Otherwise, stenciling is also an option. We don't have the stencils ourselves, but if someone wanted to stencil them, that's another way of doing it. You do need to redo the stencils too, because eventually they fade away, but that is another option. And if you wanted to do the door hangers, knowing that the Boy Scout troop is going to be doing these, I don't know if they'll be doing door hangers as well. I can give you the door hangers to go along with that, and that just gives you a bunch of information about the things that are not supposed to be going down the drain. So that is one of the things where that score can quickly be increased on that one. So once the Boy Scouts go through, that will automatically improve your score by a couple points on my evaluation. And then the final thing we look at is just the general appearance, which usually I kind of gauge a little bit of everything in there, just kind of the overall look. I gave the ranking of that as a fair. Mainly it's due to no vegetation being along the shoreline. You do have those islands, but it's important to see it in more areas than just that. Also, by having so few Florida yards, the Florida yards are really something that helps prevent pollution from getting to the pond. So again, you don't need to have a yard that has plants covering the entire area. Again, you can have some turf grass out there, that's not a problem. It's just doing, kind of expanding on the existing plant beds that you have and incorporating as much of the Florida-friendly landscaping. So by doing those things, your score can be improved. And again, we look at these as kind of the management moving forward. They're all things that are low cost. There's resources out there too that can help with some of these and can easily improve the pond environment that's out there. So anyone have any questions of any of that?
Questions? Hold the microphone close.
Yes, sir. Aeration of a pond is one of the very good things.
Aeration of pond, depending on what kind of aeration is done, can have some differing effects. Fountains that just spray the water out of the spray water up, they don't provide many benefits to the pond. They basically provide a little bit of extra oxygen to the surface of the water, which is the area that has higher oxygen anyways. So you're not really doing a lot really for the pond. You look at those more, if you want to get that kind of aeration system, it's more for the look. So as long as you guys have that in mind, you're fine with getting that. Our program doesn't offer any aeration systems. They are fairly expensive and they require a lot of maintenance and an electric source for most of them. I think that there's some solar powered ones, but most of them need an electric source. So we don't provide those, but if you wanted to get one, the one that you would get would be one that is more of a bubbler system that aerates closer to the bottom of the pond. That will then help distribute air throughout the water column rather than just the surface of the pond. But again, the plants will provide oxygen in a natural way. And they also provide through the sediment and the organisms that are in there, they help in filtering that water as well. So they provide the same results, actually they provide better results than using aeration systems. But if you wanted to do that, you can add those as kind of an added thing for the pond. But again, the vegetation will provide that, if not more, services than just the aeration system. There was a study, I went to a conference recently, and there was a study done by the University of Florida that evaluated between aeration systems, planted shorelines and shallow areas, using copper sulfate, which is sometimes used for controlling algae, and there might have been another, I think those were the three main things that they tested, and vegetation, ranked highest out of all those and all the tests that they ended up doing. So definitely vegetation is inexpensive because we provide the plants, and we'll provide those services and more services than the aeration system does.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at each table and go around and have everybody at the table ask a question.
Just a quick question. The water by our house is like 3 feet deep at the seawall. Is that okay to plant these plants there?
Most of the plants like water that is probably about 2 feet at the most. There are some plants that can do okay in some deeper water. There's a plant that should do well in that area. It's called fire flag. It grows taller though. Some of the taller growing plants are what are going to do better in some of those deep areas. But because it's so deep, it grows to a certain height, and so it's really not going to. If you were standing at level with it, it would grow high. But because it's deep in the water and you got the seawall, it's probably going to be growing maybe about this high or something if you're standing on the seawall looking out. So there's definitely plants that we can provide for those areas too, but most of these other ones wouldn't do well that deep. Some of them would be underwater because they only grow to about 3 feet tall. So, but we definitely work with it. And some of it's kind of an experiment too. Some plants, it's like, great, it would do well in this depth of water, but the soil might not be right for it. So we try to provide a variety, and plant them in various areas to see what does well. And so then we wait, about three or 4 months, see what survived, and you guys can do another planting about 6 months later. We'll have an idea of what survived to be able to then have the next planting. We'll be able to adjust the order accordingly.
How many plants are you planning on providing for our lake?
We have kind of a step system. It's in our application where we can provide, I think it's like about $600 worth of plants, or maybe a little bit more for the first planting, and that would be probably about couple thousand plants that we can provide for the first planting. The next one would be about half that. It is a 3-year program, so each year you can get more and more plants until you get enough coverage in the pond. So it's definitely kind of a step process. We won't be able to do everything at once. And as far as the planting goes, most of my groups will do the planting themselves. They'll get in the water. We only go to knee depth, so we're not going to be going deeper than that. The main reason for that is because plants don't grow that deep. And then also, when you're bending over to plant in the water, your face would be in the water if you went deeper than that. So we only go to knee depth. And so a lot of our groups will do that, but there are other options. Some of our groups, we worked with people in Sun City multiple times. We have people that, again, have gone in there and have been in steeper situations than what you have in the seawall. Other groups have decided to pool their money together and hire a company to do the planting. With one of the groups, they ended up hiring one of the nurseries that we get plants from. And I'm not sure exactly how much the nursery charged them, but it was a small pond, not too many people, not too many houses around it. And I think not everyone contributed, and I think the most someone had to contribute was like $20 to go towards paying for the nursery to do the planting for them. And they would go out there and help a little bit or hand the plants to the people that were working in the pond. But definitely it's not a cost prohibitive thing to have a company come and do the planting. So that's an option. Another thing too is Girl Scout, Boy Scout troops. We've worked with them before, and Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful too, and having some of their volunteers come out and help. The only thing sometimes with those volunteers is you definitely need to keep an eye on them because working with like teenagers, sometimes they'll get distracted or lose interest, things like that. So definitely keeping an eye on them so that the goal is accomplished in getting the planting done. Sometimes we've seen plants drifting off in the pond because they just were not paying attention. So we definitely don't want that to happen. That's kind of our money just going to waste. So that is definitely a possibility, and we work closely with Keep Tampa Bay Beautiful. They have a huge volunteer list that if you let them know what's going on and when and where it is, they will find a group of volunteers to help out. So those are just some options for the planting.
We have another question.
I have 3 quick questions. One is I live right on my property line. There is a drainage pipe. And at the end of the drainage pipe, it goes into the pond. I'm getting weeds. And they're growing up and they're beginning to impinge on the flow.
Okay. If you have concerns about the drainage pipes, the flow of them being obstructed, there is, through the county, we have maintenance crews throughout the county, and there's a phone number, and I can give it to you afterward, where you can call and put in your request to have someone come out and inspect it. They'll come send someone out here within a week, and they will see if the plants are impeding the flow. If they are, then they'll do some vegetation control just outside the pipe to clear it out. If they determine that the flow is not obstructed by those plants, they will not do anything. But we can talk about ways, if they end up not doing that, ways that you can control those plants if they are nuisance vegetation. And again, I can help in identifying that. I'm also giving an identification book with this folder here. It's a flip book where you can look through and try to identify the plant. You can look through there first, see if you can find a plant, and it'll let you know if it's exotic or not. If it's from a different place than our area. And If it is something exotic, then you can talk with me about how it can be controlled. There's various options depending on what the plant is. So.
Yeah, second question. Second question is there any danger of any of this vegetation getting out of control?
It's a good question about the vegetation. Is there any danger of it getting out of control? The plants that we provide, again, are low maintenance, and they only grow to a certain depth. That's why we're not able to do all the plants in some of the deeper areas, is because they will not grow that far. Even some of the deeper area plants, it's kind of iffy on whether they'll grow in 3 feet of water. They are not going to be growing and covering the entire body of water. Even the plants that grow underneath the water, it's so murky that light cannot get down to them to allow them to spread beyond where the light can get to them. So the plants will not cover the entire body of water. These plants basically are going to be growing probably about 2, maybe 3 feet at the most from the seawall. And that depends again on how steep of a grade you have right there. Most of them will probably stay within 2 feet of the seawall. So as far as your docks and your boats, you're not having to worry about these plants and getting caught up in the motor. We don't provide anything invasive, anything that's not from Florida. All these plants are from here and do well around here, not well enough to cause problems. I do have, on one of the slides, it showed some pictures of some ponds, but I have some other pictures on here where you guys can kind of get an idea of what some of the ponds have looked like in our program. So this is an example of a pond where you can see a clump of the pickerel weed on here. This is that purple flower pickerel weed, and it grows just in a clump right here. We didn't provide any of these lily pads. They were things that were growing already in the pond, and they just manage them by raking them out every so often when they start getting dense. Even the lily pads are only going to be growing to a certain depth in the water too. As far as someone had told me before that the depth of this pond is probably about 5 feet or 6 feet at the most. The lily pads might grow out that deep in the water, but the pickerel weed and all the other plants that I showed for around the shoreline would not grow that deep. And again, we're not providing these, we're providing the pickerel weed. And there's some other plants along the shoreline back in here. And these are lining the shoreline here, but you can see that there's an area that's not lined. You can leave some gaps in between the plants, and they're not going to be filling in that gap if you leave a large area. We space them about 6 inches apart when we plant them so that they will fill in those areas, but they don't spread beyond their reaches very much. They'll spread a little bit. Like this one was probably planted about like in this area, and it's spread a little bit beyond there, a couple feet or so from where they were originally planted. But again, they're not going to be taking over the pond. So that's an example of one of the ponds in our program. This one, and especially the way it's taken, it shows it a little bit denser. I mean, mainly the trees are what's kind of blocking the view here. But you've got duck potato down at the bottom here. You've got the open water. This one's a lot smaller pond than yours is. You have some vegetation that's growing in the back over here. But there's definitely some different looks. That's why we treat each of these ponds a little bit differently. This one has a Florida yard in it. And again, this is where they did the whole back area. They left some grass areas up here. But these were areas that they wanted to create a buffer of vegetation around the pond, so they did that. And Florida yards, they all look a little different. This is another example where they also had a seawall. This one's a little bit shorter of a seawall than yours is, but they planted the plants just right on the other side of it, and they did just fine. There's some plants here as well. So you can kind of get some ideas of some different ponds. They have some cypress trees in the back in that area.
Jack? Are you on? Am I on?
I can repeat the question.
Item number 1. You mentioned nuisance plants. Do you consider Sagittarius and Vallisneria nuisance plants?
Those are native ones. I don't consider them nuisance, but there's potential for them being thought of as a nuisance. Vallisneria can, cover large areas, especially if it's very clear water where the light's able to get really deep into the water. It can cover an area. Usually invasive things are things that basically crowd out other plants from being able to grow. You always want there to be a variety of plants in an area. It's more attractive to birds, other animals too, different fish. So you always want there to be a variety. So for the Vallisneria, that one, we don't provide it through our program, just because a lot of times people don't necessarily like the way it looks. But as long as it's something that allows other plants to grow in there, usually it's not a big problem. It's not going to be harmful for the pond. It just is something that people might not like the look of it. And usually people don't like the look of it. If there is an issue, it's a great plant, but if someone is not going to like the look of it, it's usually if the water level drops, like in the winter time, and the plants touch the surface of the pond, because the Vallisneria, it's called eelgrass, it grows completely under the water. When the water level goes low, the tops of the plants touch the surface. People don't like the look of it, but if they just waited, a few more months when we started getting rain, the water level will go back up and suddenly the problem's gone. So sometimes people will see certain things one time of year and they'll react real quickly to fix the problem, when if they would just wait just a short period of time, the problem would be alleviated. And again, it's not a problem for the pond. The Vallisneria is actually great for filtering the water. It's just some people don't like the look of it. So I know Vallisnerias in some of the ponds around here, and sometimes we'll get calls from people about the Vallisneria, and we always get a call when the water level's low and the plants are touching the surface. It didn't mean that the plants grew all of a sudden, it's just the water level went down. So I don't consider the Vallisneria to be a problem.
That's, are you mainly talking about the Vallisneria gigantica, which grows to about 36 inches? Or or the Trifolia, which is only about 6 to 8?
Yeah, the 6 to 8, that one, would fit. The ones that are growing, I'm not sure exactly which species is growing over in the other ponds. I haven't been there. It's just we get a call and they're always saying it's, the tape grass or eelgrass that's out there. So I don't know in particular which one it is that's growing in that pond.
Mirror Lake is loaded.
Okay, that one might be the lake that we're getting.
Gigantica. Now then, I want to back up. Some years ago, a gator went through the gate going from North Lake to Middle Lake. I had to rebuild it. About a year later, the county comes in, something about the road, they tore up the whole thing there and rebuilt it. During that time, Middle Lake, a myrrh carp had come in. Ours had all died out by now, and that's, I think what we've got is the remnants of them. I have planted various years Vallisneria, which I get from the other lakes around here, the Trifolia. Last spring, 2012, Ed Dowdy and I planted some along Ed Dowdy's, and then I went down and planted some at the spillway between North Lake and Middle Lake. That has spread very good. The one up by Ed's did not spread, and that's why now, when I moved here 20 years ago, I was catching bass off my dock. The bass have gone, mainly because of the tilapia and blah, blah, blah. And everything you have discussed here has been an emergent, not a submergent. And I'm looking for something for the fry. You see where I'm standing, hon?
Yeah, he was talking about he is interested in submerged vegetation. We always provide submerged vegetation with our plant orders. And the reason why we provide submerged vegetation that grows completely under the water, is because that's basically the workhorse for the pond. It's great at filtering the water. It can get to areas that the emergent, the stuff that's growing just on the shoreline, can't get to. So the submerged vegetation, we don't provide the eelgrass. The things that we provide are called lemon bacopa and also red ludwigia. and those don't grow as tall as the Vallisneria does. The only problem that we might have to start off with in this pond is just that the clarity of the water, how clear it is, you can't see very deep. So what we'll try to do is plant some of the submerged vegetation in some of the areas where it's a little bit shallower. Near the flow into the pond, there's some spots there from where the golf course is on the east side. There's some spots there where I can see all the way down into the water, so we want to plant some submerged there. There's never a guarantee that they're going to end up surviving though, but we definitely want to try to plant those. And again, they're low growing, so they're not going to be things that are going to be, getting into propellers or anything like that, and likely they might not end up growing or surviving because they need light and the light might not be able to get down to them. But we'll try doing that. And what we might end up needing to do is plant the stuff along the shoreline first and maybe doing some floating islands of plants to try to get some of that clarity looking better. And then once that happens, we might be able to get some of the submerged plants to better establish. So it might be kind of a step process where we'll try it out, see if it ends up being okay, but we can always kind of adjust things later on, maybe add it later down the road. But definitely we want submerged vegetation to be in there. That's why having the grass carp eating everything out of there is not a good idea, because we want there to be some submerged, even if it's hydrilla, something that's in there. I mean, I definitely don't want anyone putting hydrilla in there because it is invasive and it's illegal to put it in the pond. That's why we're going to try to do it, put the submerged stuff that is native, things that are not going to be taking over, that they'll allow other things to grow around there.
Okay, my question has to do with if you have the filtering plants, is that going to make the lake shallower for navigation, and will it affect your irrigation systems that pull water from the lake?
Yeah, I mean, those are two very good concerns, where having the plants in there, is it going to make the pond shallower, and also is it going to end up impeding the irrigation system. Where I saw a lot of the irrigation pipes are further out into the pond, I mean, maybe 10 feet or so from the shoreline. The plants aren't going to be growing out that deep, and even the submerged vegetation, especially the way the conditions are right now, the submerged vegetation is not going to get out that far. So that was as far as the irrigation goes. For the pond itself and the depth, the plants are not going to be affecting the depth of the pond. Things that can affect the depth of the pond is if you have, the algae itself can add some accumulation to the bottom of the pond. With the algae growing and dying, they die and fall to the bottom of the pond, decompose, and then slowly they end up adding to the muck layer that's in there. Or if you have a lot of floating vegetation and you're killing it all off and it decays and goes to the bottom of the pond, those are all things that can add to the muck accumulation in there. Having the plants around the shoreline is not going to be affecting the depth. Some people might think that it is, when in actuality it's really just being in a drought or being wintertime and the water level's gone down. Things fluctuate, and it could even be a couple years where it's like, hey, I've been living here 5-10 years and the water level's never been this low. I think that the pond, the muck is accumulating. Well, it just happened to be a drought for the last several years, and the water level just isn't at the height that it has been in the past. So that's definitely a good question. So, but neither of those are going to be an issue with the vegetation.
You mentioned lemon latopia. What was that other one?
It's lemon bacopa. It's all in the notebook, and I'll show you on here in the notebook I have. Here's the lemon bacopa. This is a picture of it outside the water. It's lemon bacopa or water hyssop. But again, it grows in the water. This just happened to be a picture when the water level went down. When the water level gets down, it's very, very low growing. It basically looks kind of like a ground cover. When the water level goes up, it basically would grow probably about 6 inches at the most or something from the bottom. the water. And then the red Ludwigia, I'll show you that one up here. I don't have the full page on that one. This is the red Ludwigia right here. And it's green with a red underside to the leaf. And that's why they call it the red, or that's where they get the red from, is because the underside of the leaf is red. And those are a similar growth habit as the lemon macoba. And what we would do is in our order, we'd supply a little bit of each of those and see which, if any, end up surviving. Whichever one does, we would just add more of that to the order. But again, it's not going to be anything that's invasive. Whenever I see this in ponds, it never goes to the deep areas of the pond. It usually stays pretty close to the shoreline. It just might extend a little bit further out than the plants right on the edge of the water. But again, it's not going to be going even 10 feet beyond the shoreline right here.
Any other questions?
The hydrilla, that grows a lot deeper in the water. So if you were here when they had hydrilla, these submerged plants do not go out that deep in the water.
What time frame are we looking at for the plants and the plantings?
Because you guys are doing the, Boy Scouts are doing the storm drain markings, that's usually the first step. The next step would end up being we could do a planting. So once you guys are ready, I just need about 3 weeks notice to be able to get the plant order approved and to the nursery. And then the plants are delivered the day ahead of time, unless you end up having the nursery do the planting as well. Then we would just have it delivered the day that you want to do the planting. And all of them are delivered to someone's house, so you would just let me know where they need to be delivered to. And then I come out for the first planting to help show you guys kind of how to plant them and where to plant them. And the plantings after that, you would end up needing to do multiple ones because the pond is so big, you can't do it all in one planting. For the following plantings, we just do that same process, except for you guys would then be on your own. You would be comfortable at that point with where everything could be planted and how to plant them, that you'd be on your own for the next one. If you do have any questions, though, I'm always around, so you can always ask me.
You said on that stuffed potato that they actually eat the roots of the plant.
Yeah.
Will that encourage more ducks to enter the pond?
No, it's a source of food for them. What usually encourages ducks, especially Muscovy ducks, to come to an area is when you feed them. As soon as you start feeding those Muscovy ducks, they are there in multiple numbers, families, generations from generations are hanging out. We discourage people from feeding the wildlife out there because that usually ends up causing problems. Where you start seeing a lot of birds in the area, they go to the bathroom, their waste, just like any other waste, causes pollution for the pond, causes problems. Plus it's just a nasty mess when you've got all that bird waste around. And also discouraging, especially animals like gators. Do not feed the alligators because that adds major problems to an area. So any wildlife that's around here, definitely enjoy watching it, but don't encourage them to get closer to you because that prevents them from eating their natural materials. The duck potato, that's a source of food for them, but it doesn't mean that you're suddenly going to have a lot of ducks coming over here and tearing up the plants. You might see a duck or two around the area, but nothing really that's going to be much more than what you would already see around. So.
Yes, I was going to ask what kind of time frame are we looking at once we get the plants planted, that it would clear it up, and if you're pretty sure that would take care of it?
It's definitely a process. The way the pond looks right now did not happen overnight, so it always takes some time to get it looking better from here on. It's hard to say exactly how quickly it's going to end up happening. And the plants themselves are not going to be solving all your problems. That's why we look at the other factors as well, like the Florida yards, the grass clippings, those types of things, the pet waste. Those are all contributing to the problem. So if you only put plants in there and left the other problems out there, you could still potentially see some issues with the pond. There needs to be a natural balance out there from the nutrients that are in the water from what's being taken up by the plants that are out there, taken up naturally. So we'll put the plans in there, see how things work, but definitely you need to be doing the other things as well. Like again, talking to your management companies, or if you're doing it on your own, the fertilizing, leaving that 10-foot barrier, even more is better. Not fertilizing right before a heavy rain, or even within 48 hours of a heavy rain. All that's doing is just washing in there when it rains. So it's okay to use fertilizers if the grass needs it, or even if some of your planted beds need it. I don't have to talk about it. Even if your planted beds need it, fertilizing as needed, but more fertilizer is not better. All it does is just wash into the pond and cause those problems in there. So that's why I definitely encourage everyone in doing the Florida-friendly landscape practices, and I'd be happy to talk more about that, get you in contact with people that can provide more information as well. But we know a lot about Florida-friendly landscaping, so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have about it. So it's a lot to talk about in just a short amount of time. That's why I don't go into a lot of detail about it. But you guys have some of your neighbors that are employing those, so I would definitely look to them. And if you happen to be one of those neighbors, I encourage you to talk with more people just to give them some ideas of things that they can do in their yard. You guys can all work together in improving the area.
When we get into this program, are we going to have to do that water testing and freeze it and take it over to Lithia Pinecrest like we had before? See, I was in it, and it got to be a sure pain in the patoot.
Well, lucky for you, I guess. Unlucky for us, we lost some funding recently, and so we're not doing that water sampling program anymore. So it's not part of our program anymore. And it was never a requirement for our program. It's just some people wanted to know kind of what the water quality was in there. But because we lost the funding, we don't do water sampling in the ponds anymore. So and most of the stuff you can tell as far as the water quality goes, you can tell just by a visual look at it, the conditions of the pond. The water quality stuff was just kind of a verification.
Question?
We're interested in doing the rain gardens and also the floating islands. How do we contact you about information for that?
I have cards up on the table. You can pick one of those up on the way, and I'd be happy to email you some of that information and talk to you more about it, definitely. Those are our two great things to do. The floating island thing was actually something that one of our pond groups came up with the design. So if you guys come up with some innovative ideas, be happy to run them by me, because it might be something that we pass on to other groups if it's something new and creative.
Jennifer, when it comes time for the planting, there will be some plants that are available and some aren't. So when it comes time for the planting, we can notify everybody what plants are available, and if you choose to participate in it, then all you need to do is give us an idea of what plants you want behind your property and so forth, and we're going to try to see if we can make it happen.
Yeah, if you look on the notebook, you'll see a listing of our plants, and they're basically all available all year long, except for in the freezing weather is basically most of the times that the plants would not be available. And we don't do plantings that time of year anyways, just because it's more stressful for the plants. They're harder to establish. So we plant all year long, except for usually like January, February time period. The rest of the year is free game for planting. So.
Is that your URL down there at the bottom?
I don't have one of those in front of me. What's the URL?
http://FYN.
That's not ours. That's for the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods program. That's where I actually got all that information, even the images on there of the Florida Yards. They have a website where you can, it's interactive, where they have just a house, and you can add, plants to it and kind of get ideas of what it would look like. So yeah, if you visit that website, that has all the information about Florida Yards and Neighborhoods and how you can, do more of those principles in your yard. Ours, you can, it's on our Adopt unsure. And also, it's not working. My business card has our website on there. So yeah, sorry about my microphone going. I'm talking too long apparently. Doesn't want to work for me anymore. Just give me the red light. There we go now. Yep, definitely. If you guys have any other questions, I will not be talking on the microphone, but feel free to run them through who ends up being the group representative and send me an email. And when you guys know when you want to plant and who's going to be planting, just send me an email with a list of plants that you guys would like. And if you're unsure of what plants, I'd be happy to help you out with that and giving you some ideas and suggestions. As far as the mock-ups go, I have those pictures in here to show, kind of the plants that, I kind of had ideas for using in the pond. So again, any questions, that's what I'm here for. Great.
Okay, before we adjourn here and everything, there's a few more things that we have to do. And one of the first things that we have to do is we have to elect a pond representative. This is the person who would be the go-between between Jennifer and the program.
It wasn't just me.
So
You grabbed the ball, you still got it, guy.
I was a high school teacher and I could talk above any kind of noise. Is there anybody that would like to accept the position? Do we have anybody to nominate anybody for the position of pond representative? Mr. Jack Panther.
You, representative, you gotta grab the ball and...
I second that.
I move nominations be closed.
Thanks, buddy.
He'll get you to that.
Is that okay with everybody? The next thing we need, which is probably the most important thing, is we are going to have a tablet and we need volunteers to assist in a multitude of things, to supervise the planting of the plants, up to whatever needs to be done on the lake. The lake belongs to all of us, and it's our duty to make sure that it is healthy. So we'll have a piece of paper over here, and anybody that would like to volunteer their time, please leave your name and your phone number, and I will be getting in contact with you. I'll let you know what we need and if you're available and so forth. The more names we have, the better it's going to be, because we're not always available at the same time. So please be generous, with the time of the lake and so forth, and give us some names of that list. Also, we have lists over there for people who want plants. If you want plants behind your house or in the water behind your house and everything, put your name on the list of, that you want plants. If you don't want plants of any kind, there's also a list over there where you put your name and your address and so forth, and none will be planted, in your immediate possession there. Question?
I think it would be good to have a committee that you would work with, that people would volunteer to be on the committee, to work with.
What's that again?
Yeah, but volunteers for the committee though, not only to assist with planning.
Yeah, well, that's what we would do. We would form a committee of volunteers, and like I say, but we need names to draw from, when something arises. And like I say, if you notice behind your house, maybe the plants are going crazy. You never know how plants are going to act. Normally they don't grow where you want them to grow, and they grow where you don't want them to grow. We need a committee. You give me a call, then I would round up my troops and everything, and if you want them eradicated, we'll get rid of them. If you want them cut down to not so many, we'll do that. Whatever you want, that's what we'll do. But we do need this vegetation around our lake. And if you take a clear glass, scoop the water up, and you look and you'll see it's green. Okay, those are planktonic algae. And they bloom every 14 days. And so the longer we let this thing slide, the greater it's going to happen, and the more polluted the lake's going to get. And like Jennifer said, eventually the fish are going to die. And when the fish die, all the birds are gone, and we're going to end up with a dead lake. That might not be 2, 3 years, 4 or 5 years. It might be 10 years down the road, but we need to take care of it.
She implied that until those Boy Scout things are planned, we can't start.
Yeah, there's also another program, I think it's called Keep Hillsborough Beautiful or something like that. I will get that name. They have high school kids that need to volunteer for, community service and so forth. Most of us aren't going to get in the water. I will see to it that we do have somebody there that will do the planning. We just need to put a rope around their neck and make sure that they stay right into the center.
And just to answer the question, we can get the plants and do the planting before the Boy Scouts put the labels on. The fact that we have a plan to do that is sufficient.
Okay. So what we need to do is we need to get a list of people who want plants and put your name on the list, and we'll go from there. Yes.
I think each homeowner should realize that they're responsible for those plants to help plant plants if they're able.
Who's that?
I think every homeowner should realize that they're responsible to help plant plants.
Well, if they can. Yeah, if you're able to plant, we would love to help you. If you can't, we will have somebody do it for you. So like I said, the more people we have working, the better this whole project.
So please put, if you want plants, and please leave your surveys here for her. You don't have to say what type of plants you want. You can wait for that. But if you want plants, put your name on that list.